Thank you so much. And of course, it is on that note that we now talk to Counsel Jude Byamukama on this. Just how much will courts influence the electoral roadmap and calendar, knowing from your experience and history dealing with the Electoral Commission and courts?
I'm rather skeptical about the extent to which the courts of law influence the electoral calendar for two reasons. One, we have less than 6 months for nominations and and campaigns to really be in progress, and it's very unlikely that courts would render a decision which would have a very significant bearing on the electoral process within that very short time frame, because when a decision is made, for instance, by the High Court, it would mean there are supposed to be 2 appeals with a party who is dissatisfied. That would mean Court of Appeal and then the Supreme Court. And the possibility that that can be done within a 6 months time frame is extremely remote. Then secondly, from precedent, courts have had a tendency of treating very lightly cases which are filed, which have a bearing on the electoral calendar, but which are not necessarily in the form of election petitions, whether of local government, parliamentary, or presidential. There seems to be a tendency within the judiciary not to take very seriously these cases that are filed prior to kickstarting the electoral process. And I say this because in 2016, for instance, I know there was a case which was filed by an individual who was protesting the manner in which the police had interfered with the attempt by candidate Mbabazi to do consultations. And a matter was filed before the High Court. A decision was rendered which really didn't resolve the merits of the dispute. It was, I think, it was also an application that was made before the High Court. And then the then Justice Stephen Musota, who is now in the Court of Appeal, dismissed the application, ruling that the complaints which had been raised should be resolved first by the Electoral Commission. The party who filed it was dissatisfied and wanted to appeal to the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. As far as I can tell, up to this day, his appeal in the Court of Appeal is still pending. It's still pending.
Yes. And that's why I want to ask you my final question. Just how much is this election and the law, in terms of the law and this election, it's being billed as quote-unquote a scientific election. Do you think it will pass the legal tests across many of the aspects of it?
First of all, I think it is an abuse of the word scientific to call it a scientific election, because as we all know in the ordinary language, scientific would mean something which is orderly, which is organized, which is objective, and which has results that are an outcome of an objective and not a biased process. Now, so when we talk about scientific elections, I think it's an abuse of the term scientific. What we have so far, when we go by the guidelines of the Electoral Commission has no idea how candidates are supposed to campaign. And candidates are being told they should use television and radio stations. The Electoral Commission does not have a mandate to force broadcasters to choose whose views they will air or whose views they will not air. Like we have seen, it's a global issue, even with the social media. You see the dispute, for instance, between Donald Trump and Twitter and Facebook. Yes. And these ones are saying, no, we have a right to censor, and others are saying, no, you shouldn't be censoring. At our local level here, we shall have that challenge as well. As a matter of fact, in some areas, radios are owned by people who are participating in the electoral process as well. Yes. How are they going to provide a platform for their political opponents? Are we going to have the Electoral Commission sitting down with the Uganda Communications Commission and force owners of television and radio to give equal airtime to every candidate? It's that complicated, and so I frankly think it's very misleading for us to call these scientific campaigns. What we have is really an exercise that looks to be bungled up from the word go, and it's very unfortunate.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us, Jude. That's, of course, been Jude Byamukama, who is a key election lawyer. He will be speaking to us much more as the election goes on. Back to you in the studio.